So with that, I think it is the right time to start right now as we are 1 minute past the hour. So first of all, welcome to this great session. During this session, you can ask any questions related to Azure Stack HCI as well into technology to our experts that we have for you today. So we have a couple of small house rules that we need to go through before we start the session. First of all, my name is Pierre. I'm part of Intel Corporation, and I'm looking at the commercial relationship between Microsoft and Intel. And with me, I got some great experts. First of all, today what you can expect is a couple of things, right? There's an open conversation where you can ask any questions you have. We have as well some team introductions for you for each of the experts. We have an open Q&A session where you can submit all your questions through the chat. And there's as well like a closing out. Before we go into the Q&A session, there's some really important things you need to go through. How to engage with those experts. First, any questions to our experts. They're keen to answer your questions and making sure that they can help you on your journey. You can ask the questions by yourself under your own name or anonymously. And if you see a question that you think is interesting, you can put your thumbs up in the chat so we can make sure it is a priority question. The experts will as well answer each of your questions verbally. And if needed, we can make sure that as well we can answer through the chat. And experts will provide resources once the sessions conclude, and you can learn more around Azure Stack HCI and Intel technology after the session. On top of that, it's really important to make sure that we follow some rules around ATEs. First of all, the session will be recorded. Make sure that you're okay, that your name potentially will show up in that recording. Please don't record the session by yourself. The recording will be available after this session, and then you can rewatch that later on. If you want to help the moderators, please don't spam the inbox too much. If you have a good question or you see a question that's related to your question, make sure you vote the question up. And the last part is there's a Microsoft Code of Conduct that you can find in the chat. There's a dedicated link if you have any more questions around that. Here's a quick snapshot of the Code of Conduct. If you have more questions, there's the link available in the chat. So with that, we will start the session today around Azure Stack HCI. And as I mentioned in the beginning, and maybe some people are late, my name is Dataon. I'm part of Intel Corporation, and I'm looking after the sales and marketing relationship. With me, I got three other great experts that can tell you more around Azure Stack HCI. First of all, Ellen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Ellen Kirby. I'm a senior program manager with the Azure Stack HCI team. Really looking forward to talking to everyone, and especially our friends that we've brought with us that are customers deploying Azure Stack HCI.
That's great, Ellen. Thank you so much, and welcome to this session. Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Andrew. I work at Benenden School. I'm the systems administrator here, and happy to talk about anything about Azure Stack HCI and our implementation of it.
Great, welcome, Andrew. And last, we have Paul. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Paul Mowney. I'm a systems architect with Bradley, Arant, Boult, Cummings. It's a law firm in the US.
Okay, welcome, Paul, Andrew, and Ellen. Great to have you here. So I think we have one question already lined up coming through the Q&A. And so, Ellen, do you want to ask that first question?
Yes, absolutely do. So one of the things that we're getting asked about are some of the key benefits around Azure Stack HCI and how people are utilizing it as part of the hybrid strategy to solve for their business needs. I think this is a great question because one of the things that we hear very often is that Azure Stack and Azure deployment plans are really helping solve a problem around moving your workloads into the cloud, but maybe not being able to move all your workloads into the cloud. So I've already noticed in some of our questions coming in that folks are asking about being able to keep content on premise and having places for regulatory or sensitive data. And what we really are able to accomplish with this is that ability to keep that data safe and on premise and secured in meeting your compliancy requirements while still allowing you that flexibility of management and monitoring and support within Azure.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Evan. I think that is especially the benefit of Azure, right? getting it from cloud to edge, as well having HCI managed from the cloud if you want to, is a lot of that value that comes together. So hey, Ellen, if we then look further on this, like, do you see like any questions coming in that are interesting for our experts from the field?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the first ones we're being asked about are some of the specific reasonings around the adoption of Azure Stack HCI. So perhaps, Andrew, if you don't mind taking this first one, we'd like to understand a little bit more about the problem that Benenden was solving when they chose to move forward with Azure Stack HCI.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So at that time, it was about nearly a year ago now, I guess, we were looking at a hardware refresh, and we had separate compute and storage for our Azure Stack HCI cluster. And so that was our separate compute and storage, which were our Hyper-V cluster. So we were looking at what solutions were out there that would help us move forward with our technology, but we needed to have a stretch cluster. And we did have an eye on HCI, but at that time, it wasn't available, and we were kind of dismissing it, although we could see a lot of great things about HCI. And then we heard about Azure Stack HCI, and that's kind of where we started our journey into seeing what that could provide for us, because that enabled us to have that stretch cluster. That's something we really need for our campus, to give us that resiliency.
No, that's awesome, Andrew, and I think that helps a ton to kind of understand that.
I agree with you, Ellen, and I think that's really useful for our audience. Andrew, in question on top of that is, like, you mentioned stretch clustering is one of the important things you did there. What was the problem that you tried to solve HCI with Intel?
With Intel, and so when we were looking at the Azure Stack HCI solution at the time, the vendor we were looking at with their system, although all the component parts was based on Intel, and that was all certified for Azure Stack HCI, their whole solution wasn't certified for Azure Stack HCI. So that's when we were pointed over to Dataon, who we worked with to build our solution. It was completely based on Intel, and the parts were certified for Azure Stack HCI as well as the whole solution. So that was a big deal for us, because it meant we were going into a platform that was completely supported. And the benefit, I think, for Azure Stack HCI was where before we had systems where we've got our iSCSI SAN, that's got a separate kind of upgrade model. We've got our servers, they're just a standard generic servers. They've got their own drivers and firmware kind of update procedure, and then we've got our software, and so all these separate things have got their separate ways of updating it and keeping it fresh and up to date. Whereas with Azure Stack HCI and Intel and all that kind of things coming together, that's where you can combine all these things together, the software updates, the hardware updates, and keep everything together and secure, and keep everything rolling forward in the same way in one place, which is where Windows Admin Center comes in as well.
Oh, that's great, Andrew. That's really appreciated and good insight. So with that, Ellen, do you have any other questions coming in?
Yeah, actually, this one's for Paul specifically. Paul, can you talk a little bit about why you would want to potentially move forward with a solution like Azure Stack HCI over something like just a vanilla S2D?
Sure, yeah. So we started using S2D storage spaces direct since Windows Server 2016. And Microsoft continues to make improvements with Windows Server 2019, and now with the new OS, Azure Stack HCI. Microsoft is really focusing more on still allowing you a hybrid environment. They understand the importance of you keeping data on premises, but also integration with Azure. And the more integration with Azure, the better. You can have a central management plane, and it's just going to make things a lot easier.
That's awesome. And, you know, we're getting a ton of great questions in here. One of the next ones that I noticed on here is a couple customers were just asking a little bit about, a couple folks on the call were asking a little bit about whether you guys considered other options, other vendors, other hyper converged infrastructure solutions. And either one of you are welcome to chime in on that one if you want to talk a little bit about it.
Sure, I can talk on that.
Go ahead, Paul.
So we did certainly look at other vendors, but we use Dataon just like Andrew does, and I can you can see the similarity in, say, going to a restaurant, find something you like, you keep going there, you keep ordering the same thing. And in this case, Dataon, we've used them since Storage Spaces Direct came out in 2016. So we've been using them, I guess, for 4 years now, and we have it, maybe 11 different clusters deployed. So there's no reason to change when we have high performance with Intel hardware and Dataon hardware that's all certified to use Azure Stack HCI. So we don't have a reason to change.
Do you want me to add to that?
You're more than welcome to, and I also have one specifically for you, Andrew. So maybe as you're answering that one, the other thing you can also answer is we've gotten some folks wanting to know how many nodes you deployed and whether you went switch or switchless in your configuration.
Okay. So we were looking at other vendors. I think because we're based in the UK, some of our options were a little bit limited with Azure Stack HCI, and it's because it was so new. And I think the biggest problem for us at the beginning was certification and making sure that the system was benchmarked. I think that's the really important thing when you're looking at a solution like this. We're coming from a Hyper-V cluster where it's been a bit opposite. We didn't know anything about Dataon when we were pointed over to them, because obviously we're from the UK, and we've been basically HP based Hyper-V cluster ever since we've had Hyper-V, we've had Hyper-V since the very beginning. So it was a big step for us, moving away from a kind of tried and tested platform where you just got separate compute and storage. But to us, in terms of the pricing and the simplicity of putting these two systems together, it made a lot of sense. Dataon really helped us build the right solution for us, and it was benchmarked and everything, so it was perfect for us. So I think that was a good move for us. But I think now you're going to be seeing a lot of vendors picking up other solutions now for this. In terms of what we've done here and at the makeup of our cluster, is very similar to what we had on our current production cluster, which is just 4 nodes. We've just got 2 nodes in per site, stretched across 2 buildings. It's in the same campus. We've got fiber between the 2 sites. We've got 20 gig fiber between the 2 sites. And we have a 5700 flex fabric switches between the 2. So that's our core production cluster that provides kind of all that resilience there. So we have 4 5700 switches. All the nodes are interconnected to those switches, and that goes between the 2 sites. And then per site, we have got interconnects with the RDMA network interfaces. That's what the Storage Spaces Direct is talking to in each site. So these are connections that connect the server nodes directly together. So you get maximum throughput between those 2 nodes on each site to make sure you're getting the best of all worlds, basically, between your Storage Spaces Direct and your storage replica between sites.
Andrew, that sounds really great, and an amazing amount of technologies from Microsoft and Intel. One question that comes in through the chat is like, how did you define the right solution for your organization? So as you know, you work with Dataon, same with Paul. Dataon was both your partner. They have a broad range of different solutions. So how did you work with Dataon, and how did you define what's the right solution within your organization? So do you want to answer that first, Andrew, and then we switch to Paul?
Yeah, go ahead. So for us, it was largely down to cost, but also making sure that we had that resiliency. That was really important, to have that fault tolerance and that stretch cluster. So when we're building a stretch cluster, we can't just go with 2 nodes, then that soon becomes 4 nodes. That seemed to be the right number for us. Although we're getting a massive benefit in terms of performance with Storage Spaces Direct and everything like that, we don't need a full flash HCI solution. We've got a hybrid solution, so we've got NVMe RAM, NVMe cache on top of spinning disks. I think that gives us the best of both worlds, really. And it's the fact that once you're building the solution with Dataon, they're going to benchmark your specific solution before they send it out to you as well. I think that was key as well, to make sure that there's no hidden surprises in there as well. The other thing we factored into it was the amount of storage we needed to get out on the other end, and we were looking at it was nested map, so mirrored accelerated parity. So we could have a failure of one node plus one disk as well. So we're really building as much resiliency in there as possible. And that's basically it, really. When we're building the solution, was just to make sure we had all those moving parts that are going to all work together.
That's great, Andrew, and sounds like Dataon was the right partner for you to make this deployment happening. So, Paul, if we switch to you, like, how have you been working with Dataon, and what is the solution you choose out of their offerings?
Yeah, so Andrew made some great points, and I have to echo his words in regards to Dataon. You know, they're really good with working with you on understanding what your solution is. For us, we're actually opting to go on the all Intel SSD route, or NVMe, for our new deployments. And to speak on switch lists a little bit, I know that was a question, especially with our remote offices, we don't have to care about our switches supporting RDMA or Rocky V2 traffic. You can just do that switch list for 2 node or even 3 nodes and use nested resiliency. You know, in my opinion, that's arguably even better than RAID 6, because you can essentially lose a limited number of disks on one node and then another disk on the other node. So nested resiliency is extremely powerful. You can still use 2 nodes for the primary data center as well, because you can stick a lot in the nodes now and reduce your physical footprint. Put a lot of RAM in there, put higher capacity Intel NVMe, and I guess if you need a lot more storage, HDD would also work really well, especially with Azure Stack HCI and the quick rebuild time of the virtual disk.
Oh, that's great, Paul, and glad to hear that you use as well our storage products inside your solution. So this is, I think, really useful information for our audience. Like, Alan, is there any other great question coming in through the chat that we should prioritize?
We've got lots of really great questions coming in. I'm answering some as quickly as I can via the chat as well, but we do have quite a few folks that are very just interested overall in things. Like, one of the ones that came in was, Andrew, this might be a quick one for you. How far apart were your stretch clusters? I think people are concerned about whether or not they should be deploying a stretch technology geographically diverse, and maybe you could talk for just a second about that.
Okay, sure. So for us, they're not that far apart. So on the same campus, they're a few hundred meters apart. So like I say, we connect the 2 sites with fiber. So we're very fortunate in that sense. We're not going between 2 cities or anything like that. Although I can't see any issue with that. If you're doing asynchronous or something like that, I would imagine that'd be completely fine. But for us, it's very simple, and we've got a very good connection. I guess we're very fortunate to be able to have 2 data centers and have that resiliency, which protecting ourselves in case one building was to fail. If one of our data centers was to fail, everything would keep running. But yeah, they're about a few hundred meters apart.
Great. I got another one on here, Dion. I thought we might want to send to these guys, because I think it's really interesting. I think folks are really curious to know what kind of an implementation timeline and how difficult that it might be to potentially add remote instances for expansion. And I know both Andrew and Paul worked on the Azure Stack HCI technology as part of our early adopter program in our private and then public previews, and had some opportunities to really go through and do the deployment multiple times, test it out, kind of go through that experience of deploying with Windows Admin Center. I thought it might be interesting to give each of them an opportunity to respond back on their perception of the difficulties of getting the deployment done and how they think it sits as far as scalability.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And Andrew, do you want to start first with that?
Yeah, sure. So we wanted, with the preview program, we wanted to make sure we were kind of using it as it was designed to be used, which was, making sure we are utilizing Windows Admin Center as much as we could. We have predominantly in the past been using System Center Virtual Machine Manager, and that was kind of our go-to tool for everything. And in this case, Windows Admin Center was a kind of new thing for us, a new experience. We did a lot of that through that. So we went through the wizard of building up the cluster right the way through the Windows Admin Center. I would say at the time there were some little hiccups, especially in terms of the kind of networking side, which I think have been ironed out now. But overall, it was ridiculously easy compared to building clusters in the past. And then after that, there was a little bit of PowerShell that we did for the volume creation because we wanted them set up with nested map, like I say, and we had to do that. But predominantly all the management and everything was done through Windows Admin Center. And yeah, we broke it down a few times and built it back up. And I mean, on the Azure Stack HCI side of things, it's dead simple. It's really quick. It's a very quick install. There's really nothing very exciting about it. It's just kind of Windows Server Core, and it just worked basically. So that was the kind of uneventful side of things. The Admin Center was the really interesting part, getting our teeth into that and seeing what that can do for us.
So it sounds like basically with the new Azure Stack HCI OS and the Intel technologies, it's pretty easy to deploy those machines inside your organization. Is that a good way to say that, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just works. So it was just there wasn't anything exciting to kind of say from that. You know, when it just all just kind of ticks along and does what it needs to do, does what you've designed it to do. You know, in the past we have been in situations where we've bought brand new servers, and the network cards didn't want to play with Hyper-V and stuff like that, and there was all sorts of issues with that. Nothing to do with Hyper-V. It was just down to the actual hardware itself. And so in this sense, it's coming from the point of view where Microsoft and Intel are working completely together on this as one, making sure that all these components will absolutely do everything you need it to when you need it to work.
So that's great, Andrew. And I think maybe something to add there is that Microsoft and Intel has been working really close together to make sure that we have a broad array of different solutions. And so if you go to azure.com/HCI, there's a whole catalog with over 200 solutions that you can deploy from edge all the way to like high intense workloads. And so with that, like we have as well Intel Select solutions that are pre-validated solutions where we make sure that software and hardware comes together in a solution that will fit your organization. So as the last part of this question, Paul, can you tell us a little bit more around like the timeline you had and how you deployed it and if you overcame any big challenges?
Sure. So going back to what I said, we've used vanilla storage spaces direct, I guess you could say, since Windows Server 2016, and now we will be deploying our first production Azure Stack HCI cluster very soon, and we already have many Windows Server 2019 clusters. So because of that, although Microsoft has done a good job allowing you to build out a new cluster Azure Stack HCI with Windows Admin Center, we naturally already have PowerShell scripts that Dataon actually created, and then we simply modify. And so now any net new cluster that we deploy, we can do it extremely fast because we already have the PowerShell script go. So if you like PowerShell, deploying a new cluster is extremely easy, and Dataon already tests all the hardware. They give you the PowerShell script. They give you PDF that says, with VM fleet and saying, hey, here you go, here's the hardware you're getting. This is what we tested it on. So you already know it's going to work. There's not a question of, is it going to have the right drivers? Everything is already set up, ready to go. You just need to either use Windows Admin Center, deploy it, or a PowerShell script that will provide you. And it's extremely easy.
No, that's great feedback, Paul. Thanks for that. Ellen, I know we have only 6 minutes left. Do you have any other interesting questions?
There are so many. My fingers are aching for typing for you guys, but we will continue to answer some of these questions even after we can complete the call. But if you disconnect from the session, you won't be able to look at the chat. I definitely want to make sure we provide some resources for folks to reach out to us if they have questions we didn't get a chance to answer. But one that I just published that I thought might be interesting for for Andrew and Paul to chime in on is we've got somebody that asks if they really need to find the right partner to deploy Stack HCI for them. And that might be your hardware partner of choice, but I also think companies will look at using some type of a solutions integrator to deploy a technology like this. And I know both Andrew and Paul really did a lot of the work on their own, and maybe could talk a little bit about their relationships with Intel Dataon and how they chose to do that kind of deployment.
So do you want me to go jump in? I'll jump in on that first if you want. So for us with Dataon, yeah, they'll lead you completely the way through the whole process. I think they'll even build it for you if you want. We take a kind of slight different approach. We like to kind of roll our sleeves up and get involved and do it ourselves so we can fully understand how it all works. So if it breaks, we understand what's happened, and they'll absolutely help you out on all of that. So they'll jump in on a call, and I think that's a good thing. So when you're working through something and you're stuck on a problem, you're not quite sure what's going on, to have your partner be able to jump in onto call and bring that kind of knowledge and that expertise in a very short period of time. It probably take about half an hour just to really work through something and get you back up and running. I mean, that's just kind of invaluable to us. But overall, we did all of it ourselves, and we're, it's fun. And I just wanted to add to the earlier point Paul was making, because there was another thing that was, because I just remembered off the top of my head, with Windows Admin Center, you've got Must from Dataon, which is the extension. So that's going to be building in your firmware and driver updates coming in with Windows Admin Center and cluster aware updating. Plus also they've done a really great job with the extension in terms of call home service. If you've got any kind of drive failures or anything like that, email alerts, to really keep you in touch with your data center and what's going on, and if you've got any issues with it.
That's great. And Ellen, I know we have only 3 minutes left, and I see so many questions coming in. I think we can fill this whole hour with questions. But maybe if we have like 3 minutes left and we need to close out as well, maybe 1 or 2 more questions from the Q&A. And I saw one question coming in around like, hey, how do I select the right partner? Where do I start? And I think that might be a good question for you, Ellen, on the Microsoft side, saying, hey, where can customers go to find more information around Azure Stack HCI? As well, yep. What is that ecosystem meaning for Microsoft? I know we have been working closely together to enable like big partners like Dell, Lenovo, HPE. As well, we work with system integrators and channel partners to make sure this offering is available for everyone. But if you have any insights on that, that would be appreciated.
Certainly, and I know we've spoken about it already, and I also posted it in one of the answered questions. The first place to really start going is definitely the azure.com/HCI main site. We have some great content there, including some of the efforts that we're doing for the next evolution of the Azure Stack HCI platform and additional features and functionality that are coming. We want to be very transparent with everyone and talk about what we're working on and excited about. Things that are absolutely on the road, like self-servicing VMs and others that we're making efforts to have available to all of you to be able to continue to improve the experience in Azure Stack HCI. But I also recommend taking a look at the work that we're doing on the catalog. Specifically in there, you'll have a list of all the different types of hardware that is certified at different levels to run Azure Stack HCI. And it's a great starting point to see what aligns with you in terms of your hardware desires and needs. And I know we mentioned it before, those specific types of workloads that you might want to run on HCI and figuring out how you choose the right one to go with. And many of our OEMs, much like Dell, Lenovo, Dataon, who we talked about today, have a lot of different opportunities to support these deployments and helping you design and architect. And we also have some wonderful systems integrators that some of them are even on the main HCI page that can support and help with those kinds of architectural designs and deployments.
That's great to know, Ellen, and I really appreciate this insight. So I know we're on time, and so with this, we need to close out. But thanks everyone for joining this Q&A session around Azure Stack HCI with Intel Technology. What Ellen and I mentioned before is we will keep answering your questions within the chat, so please submit them and find please more information on azure.com/HCI. So with that, thanks for your time. Appreciated all the things you submitted today. And if you want to learn more what I mentioned before, there are some other great sessions where we have created with Andrew for like in education, how to deploy Azure Stack HCI, as well. There's some social handles you can go to ask additional questions. Thank you for today.